how an organized family moves toward autonomy. So first, let's talk about the definition of autonomy. And we'll talk about this definition here. Economic autonomy is the capacity to cover one's own needs, including those of dependents, and to make independent choices about how to allocate financial resources. I think the most important part of this definition is this part, the capacity to cover one's own needs, the ability to be able to handle the things that you need to be able to handle without relying too much on outsiders or other people to help you do those things. Now, the question is, why do we care to pursue autonomy? And the answer is simple. We don't want to be at the mercy of other people. Why? Because other people don't always show mercy. So we want to be able to take care of the things we need to take care of, have the things that we need to have, regardless of whether or not other people help us, like us, or whatever the case may be. We want to have autonomy so that we can have the things that we need no matter what. Okay, so in order to get into the details of autonomy, I'm going to dig into a couple scenarios here. So I'll talk about scenario one, buying food from others. This is just an example of autonomy. Autonomy is something that needs to happen in many different categories, but I'm going to use food as an example that will make sense to most people. So in scenario one, I'll talk about buying food from others. And down here in scenario two, I'll talk about a situation in which the family provides its own food. Okay. On a previous video, I talked about how a family can use the division of labor in order to how a family's use of the division of labor could potentially lead to other businesses, the family owning and operating other businesses. One example that I talked about was a food business. So I'm just going to continue that example in order to make this point as well. This is a good place to start because when you're talking about autonomy, you're basically talking about being able to meet your own needs without the help of others. And I think the most basic needs for any human that we've heard these for a long time, we're talking about food, clothing, and shelter. So anytime that you're talking about autonomy, I think starting with food, clothing, and shelter is a very logical starting point. So that's why I will use this example of food in order to talk about autonomy. Okay, so first let's get into some of the assumptions here, right? So I'm assuming that we're talking about a family that has 100 adult family members. This family has 80 children, and the total number of family members is the 180, which is the 100 adults plus the 80 children. Okay, now here another assumption that we make is that the average daily food cost per person is $21.17. And I'm not just pulling that out of the air. I went online and I did a Google search, and this is basically what they said. So $21.17 per day per person. Okay. Now, if each person is eating about $21 per day of food, then if we multiply this $21.17 by the 180 family members, then a family of 180 is spending $3,800 per day on food. Okay. And if you multiply that per day amount by 7 days a week, then we get this $26,000, this $26,600 for the total amount that this family is spending per week. And then if we multiply this per week amount by 52 weeks in a year, then we get to this 1.3 million that this family is spending on food per year. Now, right off the bat, we notice like when we start thinking in terms of the entire family and we start aggregating these numbers, we see how quickly that numbers can get to be very big numbers. So this family of 180 people is spending $1.3 million per year on food. Now, what we have here, I also have another assumption of 3% inflation increase, and that will come into play here in scenario one. So let's talk a little bit about scenario one now that we have these assumptions out of the way. So essentially, I'm taking this 1.3 million and bringing it down here to year one. And here I have 5 years of food expenses for this family. So in year one, it's this 1.3 million, which we calculated here up top. If we take into consideration this 3% increase in food costs as a result of inflation, then every year the food would be a little bit more expensive. So in year one, it's this 1.3 million that we got from here. In year two, it's 1.4 million. In year three, 1.471. Then in year four, we have 1.5 million. Year five, we have 1.56 million. And for a total over this 5-year period of $7.3 million that this family has spent on food. Okay. Now, the main thing to recognize here is this $7.3 million that this family has spent on food over that 5-year period is money that leaves that family and goes into the pocket of someone else. Okay, so if we're in scenario one and we are buying our food from other people, that is what's happening. You're spending millions of dollars on food, and over this 5-year period, that came out to be a total of 7.3 million, and every dime of that is leaving your family and going into the pocket of someone else. Now, those of us who are interested in improving our situation have to recognize that this is $7.3 million that we have actually had in our hands at one time, and we have allowed to go out of our hands. Now, we should begin to start thinking about ways in which we can improve this situation. How can we decrease our costs? How can we maybe even turn this into our own business? We're spending $7.3 million per year, not per year, but over a 5-year period. Maybe it makes sense for us to start our own business, and we know that we already have the revenues of $7.3 million in a 5-year period. So these are the things that we are considering when it comes to autonomy. We want to be able to feed ourselves, and by doing so, we'll be able to keep this 7.3 million in our own family as opposed to giving it to somebody else. So in order to talk about that, we'll move down here to scenario 2. Okay, scenario 2. So scenario 2, the family provides its own food. Okay, so bear with me a little bit while I set this up and take you guys through this little table. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is compare this over the same 5-year time period as we did in scenario 1. So in scenario 1, we know that over this 5-year time period, the family has spent $7.3 million with someone else. Okay, so we want to use this same 5-year time period and calculate what this will look like if we begin to provide our own food. Okay, so what are the ways that we would do that? So right now I'm assuming that, okay, let's say for instance we wanted to buy commercial kitchen equipment and start to cook for our own family on a commercial scale, because if you're cooking for 180 people 2 or 3 times a day, then that's essentially what it turns into. You have to have a commercial setup so that you can be able to service these people. You won't be able to do it out of a regular kitchen that most people have. So as we go through this table, I'm going to make some assumptions about some of the costs. So let's say for instance in year 1, we had these startup costs in year 1. The first cost is this equipment cost, and I've already opened up this tab to see, okay, how much it would cost us to do that. So this says outfitting a commercial kitchen can cost anywhere from $15,000 to $250,000. I'm just going to assume the worst case scenario and say it costs us $250,000 to build a commercial kitchen that we need to service everybody in the family. Okay, so that's why you see this 250 here, 250 here. Okay. Other operating costs, I didn't break this down into detail because that's not the purpose of this video, but I'm just assuming that we have $200,000 worth of other operating costs that we need in order to get things up and running. So $200,000 in year 1 for operating costs. Okay, moving on to labor costs. Basically, this labor cost will consist of the money that we will need to pay a chef and a staff, right? And basically, I went down here to calculate this detail. So first and foremost, we have type, number of people, hourly rate, hours per week, labor costs, and labor costs per week and labor costs per year. So as far as the position of chef, I think we will need 2 chefs. We will want more than one to be on the safe side. So let's assume that we're going to have 2 chefs, and let's assume that we're going to have 3 staff members helping those 2 chefs for a total of 5 people that we need working in this kitchen. If we look online here, as far as the hourly rate for a chef, I went here. Cost average rate for a chef in the United States is $25 per hour. To be conservative, I said, okay, what if it costs us $30? Okay, moving on to the staff members, the average hourly rate for kitchen staff is about $14. So here I put $15 to be on the safe side. Okay. These people will be working for us part-time. I mean, we don't need people just sitting around for 40 hours per week. We just need people there to prepare the food. And so I imagine that they could work part-time. That may vary, that may change, but I'm just assuming a part-time work week for each one of these people, maybe 4 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's where we got this 28 from. Okay. So, and if we multiply these out, the 2 chefs times the $30 per hour times 28 hours per week, then we will be paying the chefs about $1,600 per week. We do the same calculation for the staff, we'll be paying them about $1,200 per week. And if we multiply all of this out for the yearly cost. If I multiply this weekly cost by 52, then we'll get $87,000 per year that we're paying the 2 chefs, and then we'll get $65,000 per year that we're paying the staff, for a total of 152,000. So I moved this 152 here, and I moved it up to this line. Okay, so this is where that 152 came from. Okay, lastly, we have the food costs. So the food costs, I have 485,000 here, and the way that I got that is by going here. Okay, just by getting, just using this as a nice estimation. So on average, restaurants aim for food cost percentage, the cost of ingredients as a percentage of revenue, between 28 and 35%. So basically, I'm going to use this 35% as the amount of 35% of revenue as the amount of the food costs. And basically, I calculated this 485 by saying, okay, this 1.3 million will represent the food revenue. And if you have spent 1.3 million at a restaurant on food, then that food probably really cost the restaurant 485,000. Give or take. This is all ballpark estimations, but the logic makes sense. So that's where those numbers come from in the first year. In year one, we have these costs. We have startup equipment costs. We have other operating costs. We have labor costs, and we have food costs. So as we see here in years 2 through 5, if you already spent $250 on the equipment, we're just going to assume that you don't have to buy that equipment again. I know that there may be some repair costs going on here and there, but let's just keep this example simple. This is not an analysis of a restaurant business to a scientific extent. I'm just trying to get the general idea out. Okay, so operating costs, I used the 3% inflation rate. So every year, these operating costs will go up 3%. Every year, all of these other costs will rise 3%. So that's why you see year one for operating costs is 200,000, and then by the time we make it to year 5, we're paying 225,000. Same thing with the staff cost. Started off at 152, year 5 172. Food costs started off at 485, year 5 we're at 546. So if you add up all of these costs in that 5-year period, then we will have this 4.7 million if we were to start to prepare food for ourselves. This is how much money we can save. The difference between this 7.3 million and the 4.7 million. This is how much this hypothetical family could save. And if I read the note here, I got this is much cheaper and it is worthy of our serious consideration. This is just by being able to bring this in-house, we are able to cut our food costs from 7.3 million to 4.7 million. Now, a lot of this stuff is easier said than done, but there's nothing impossible about any of the things that I'm doing. You've seen many restaurants that are not super sophisticated operations, so we can get started and do things in this fashion. None of this stuff is rocket science. None of this is out of the reach of people who are organized and operating in an intelligent fashion. So one other thing that I want to point out is if we build our own kitchen, basically, in order to start providing food to our own family, I've went through these numbers and we already see that the savings can be substantial when it comes to the total dollar amount of money that we're actually spending. The difference between this 7.3 and this 4.7 is a little bit less than 3 million, right? Now, so that's one way, that's one advantage. Now, another advantage is if some of these people are actually working for the family, let's say, for instance, the chef and the staff are really family members as opposed to strangers on the street that we have hired, then we would actually save an additional, whatever the cost of this labor is every year, we will actually save an additional, what's the total over that? Yeah, the total over that is the 800,000, meaning the family members will need to be paid, but the family members are a part of the family. So any money that we pay people who are in the family stays in the family. So even this 4.7, if these people are family members, even this 4.7 does not do justice as to how much we would really have to be spending, because it wouldn't be this entire 4.7 million that is going out of the family. If the chef and the staff are actually family members, then this money actually stays in the family, even though it's on our expense sheet as if it's an expense. But it's really money that stays in the family because these people are a part of the family. Okay, so to wrap up the video, I just want to go through a few final thoughts. Okay, so number 0 here, we decrease our food costs. So I just spent basically the most of the video talking about that. Everything that I talked about got us to the bottom line. We went from spending $7.3 million on food to spending $4.7 on food. Number 1, another advantage is we produce our own food, not strangers, and therefore we know exactly what's in it. Yeah, so we know what goes in the food. We know what goes into the preparation. We know what they're making. We know what they're putting in it, and that is also a benefit of making being in a situation where you prepare your own food. Okay, number 2. We can send meal delivery orders to dispersed family members like the many companies that already do. Meaning, if we have family like this, the kitchen makes sense when you have a bunch of people in the same area. People can come and get their food from a centralized place. But let's say, for instance, we're in a situation where some family members don't even live in close enough to do that. Then this kitchen, the family's kitchen, can also start to implement a meal delivery system if that's what we chose to do. We know that it's possible because many people already do that. You can order your meals for 7 days a week now from some company that's in another state. So if they can do it, then we can figure out how to do it and send this to our family members all over the country. Number 3 here, as the family branches out to more locations, so can the business. This means we could build new businesses organically, meaning, let's say for instance, we did turn this into, first this started off as a business where we were just feeding our own family. But let's say, for instance, we wanted to expand and start providing these products to this food service to the general public. Well, we can do that. We have this base foundation of family members, but now we want to start providing food to the general public. And as the family branches out, maybe we have one family in New York, we have another family in Florida, we have another family in another state. When we have significant family members in each one of these locations, then we can start this operation of feeding ourselves. When we have these operations of feeding ourselves, any one of these operations can subsequently expand into the situation where it is now providing food to the general public. So as the family branches out to more cities, the business also branches out to more cities. Number 4 here, this works even better if we have a family compound. So if everybody's already living in the exact same place, like it's just another advantage of the geographic closeness. If the family is all not only living in the same city or the same area, but they're also living on the same compound, then this becomes much easier to provide the meals for everybody in a very efficient way. Number 5. Some people may be worried that they may get tired of eating the same thing every day. But the fact of the matter is, we don't have to eat the same thing every day. For us, we get to choose what we want to eat. For us, it's just a commercial kitchen that can make whatever we want. We're not confined to a list of menu items like people would be in a normal restaurant. If you go to a normal restaurant, they're going to give you a menu and you're going to have to find something that's on that menu, and that menu may not change. But if it's the family restaurant, if it's the family restaurant, the family kitchen, we get to decide what we want to eat, and we got the commercial equipment to make whatever we want. But even going further with that, for number 6 here, I put all family members are on a subscription to ensure support. If you want something else on a given night, that's fine, but you still do your part by paying. Meaning everybody is already subscribed to the family kitchen. Now, if you want to go do something else on some other night, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. You can go do whatever you want to do. But since everybody is on this subscription, then the resources that are needed to sustain this kitchen are still going to be available, and make sure that it is there. But if on any given night you just don't want to eat whatever is on the menu at the family restaurant, it doesn't matter. You just go eat whatever you want to eat, but you have already paid your part, and the family kitchen will be able to continue regardless of who wants to eat what. Okay, number 7, I put we can expand and sell to the public if we choose, but we're not forced to. Okay, so we may want to just keep this as a family operation. Maybe it's the existence of this kitchen is already justified just if all it ever did was feed the family. Even if we never sold one plate to anybody else in the general public, that's fine, because the existence of this kitchen is already justified just by doing what we want it to do for us. If in the future we want to expand it, then that'll be up to us. But just by feeding the family and cutting the food costs of the family makes this a worthwhile endeavor. And lastly, number 8 here, I say the business will never fail as long as the family doesn't fail. It will always have a base of customers. This is a super competitive advantage. you can imagine, imagine having a business that you already got 180 customers, and these 180 customers are going to eat at least 2 or 3 meals from you every day. So in conclusion, this video is about how an organized family moves toward autonomy. We know autonomy is the ability to be able to meet our own needs without getting the help from others necessarily. We know we won't be able to escape, interacting and dealing with other people 100%, and nor do we really want to. But to be able to provide our own needs ourselves is a very solid position to be in. Not being able to provide for your own needs is a very precarious situation to be in. So autonomy, being able to do these things for ourselves, since we want to be able to do these things for ourselves, we think it makes sense to start at the basic necessities: food, clothing, and shelter. And in this video, I just went through an example of how we would reach autonomy within the category of food. It's important to remember that the same idea can be applied in many other categories. When we're talking about clothing, we can figure out a way to do something similar within the category of clothing, so on and so forth. So autonomy is a very important idea regardless of what we're talking about. Okay.